Hey everyone, welcome to the Growth Signal, where we are rethinking how we build customer relationships. And as you know, we always have incredible guests, but today's guest, we have a lot of really exciting things to talk about. You're gonna love her. Welcome to the show, Kristi.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. And thanks for having me, Alyssa.
Yes, I'm so excited to get into this conversation. And as you know from our our pre-conversation, and longtime listeners of the show will know, I love to start with a hot take. So let's get right
Okay.
into it. What is your hot take, Kristi?
My hot take is that corporate good girl conditioning is literally freaking killing the confidence of mid career women. And the system is still built to keep it that way.
I wish I could say that I disagree with your hot take because it would feel so good to be like, no, it is great for that corporate good girl and everything's working out and nothing is wrong. But unfortunately, no, you're 100% right.
Mm,
And it is frustrating because, as a woman who's come up through the tech community, right? I was an entrepreneur, I joined a startup. I've basically lived my whole life around Patagonia vest bros.
mhm.
And I was a young woman from the Midwest. So I didn't
Yeah.
exactly fit in with their background, their experiences and what they were able to do that I just wasn't.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And girl, I'm from the Midwest too. My first job was like my hands in the dirt detasseling corn in Illinois. So I am from the Midwest. I'm Midwest born and raised. And I can tell you it was a gut punch, even living in the Midwest and trying to navigate corporate America. Because if we're being honest, most of the women that I personally work with aren't lacking credentials. They're actually just drowning in conditioning. They've been praised for being dependable and collaborative and a team player, and literally punished and sidelined the moment they lead with some sort of clarity or with conviction. And so I really think, well, and statistics show, so it isn't just my thoughts, we've created a culture where showing up small is, in fact, what's rewarded if you're a woman, and where just be yourself is code for, hey, don't make anyone uncomfortable. Don't step outside of the lane of humility. And honestly, girl, I'm just telling you, it's exhausting.
I have a story that I always tell everyone when, those questions about like why are you the way that you are? And like we don't have that much time to go all the way into that, but I have this memory of I joined a startup, right? And my job was sales and marketing, which basically meant anything that had to do with explaining who we are, what we do, why we matter, and trying to convince people that it's worth paying for fell
Mhm.
into my lap, right? Because it was three people and we were all kind of just trying to figure it out. And I have this memory of we were working with a client. It was like one of our first, like probably the first five. And it was back before Zoom was a thing. We had like literal telephones. And I had worked with this client in the sales process to do the discovery, to write the proposal, to come up with the plan that was going to solve their problem. But when it came time to talk money, he only wanted to talk to my much older male counterpart, the guy
Mm.
who was the researcher, right? Because it was a research company. He was like the nerd in chief. He was not the salesperson in any way. And I have this memory of like sitting in his office and we're on speakerphone and he's going back and forth on pricing with this client. And I'm sitting there furiously scribbling on a piece of paper because he has no context for any of the pricing of it all. But that
Yep.
client refused to talk to me about pricing. He only wanted to talk to Mike about pricing. And if we were
And
an older company, we probably would have said, we're not working with you, but we were a startup and we needed money.
I totally get it. And how frustrating that Mike didn't redirect the client. Now, I was just at a big event in Baltimore and something similar happened. We had done a whole entire workshop on bias training. And at the end, and it's my organization that hosted the training. And at the end, the CEO came over, didn't visit with me, talked to the one guy I had brought with me, right, to facilitate the training to ask about executive coaching. Not even his company, not the one they paid to come there. I was just absolutely like, listen, and this is part of the reason why, actually, Alyssa, I created the authentic authority archetype quiz, because honestly, it's all about, listen, every year we make resolutions to like change ourselves. And I thought, hell no, this year I'm going to help people fully, authentically be themselves. And it's a pattern disruptor. Really, it helps women remember what makes them magnetic before corporate culture told them to tone it down.
Yeah, I fortunately for me, have never really been truly in corporate culture, right? And to
Mhm.
come back to like the mic thing, it's hard, right? When you're trying to just make money and the customer's being difficult. Like I didn't want to stand in the way of us making our first like real dollar because in my mind I was like, okay, he doesn't want to work with me. It's fine. But like in the end, I win because he's going to pay me. But it's still, I mean, that story is like 10 years old and it's still something that I think about and still something that I talk about. And Mike and I still work together. And it's something that we've talked about ever since of like, after that one time, we both agreed it was not happening again.
I love it. What a great partner. And good for you. Good for you for talking about it. And thanks, Mike, for being an ally in that way because seriously, happens all the time.
So let's talk about more traditional corporate America, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I was unprepared. So again, startup, small. I knew everybody. I knew their dogs' names. I knew their kids and everything.
Mhm.
But then I started consulting for like that more Fortune 100 type company. And I discovered all of the political games that get played internally and
Mhm.
with customers. Tell us about
Yeah.
your experience with that. How are we navigating that as strong women who want to be successful?
Yeah. Well, I don't really know that we're navigating it that well. I could sit here and give everybody a bunch of BS, but anybody who's actually in the environment will know that typically there's a lot of that still goes on. And I think the best way for people to navigate it is to own it. I let everybody know, listen, I'm a truth teller, right? I'm values driven. Decisions have to be in alignment. There's probably not a lot you're going to be able to say about me, from any interactions that we have, whether they go wrong or right that would be inflammatory because I just operate from an alignment and a value system that I would want most others to operate from. And that has not been what I found. I made it to the C suite and I was disgusted. My husband's a mental health therapist. It took me 3 hours on the first day of my brand new job of being a chief leader at a large financial institution. Text him and say, this isn't going to work. I'm gonna need to figure something else out. That is how bad it was. You wait your whole life to finally get there, and I got there relatively young, and I thought, "This is why you don't wanna meet your heroes. Y'all are a mess. You don't have emotional intelligence. You're not interested in how the things you say and do are felt eons after a policy is put into place." And honestly, that's why I left, and that's why I do what I do now.
Yeah, it's hard too because it's like you finally get to that pinnacle that you've quote unquote worked your whole career for, right?
Yeah.
And to be
Yep.
totally disillusioned by what you're actually seeing when you see the wizard behind the curtain and you realize, "Oh my god, it's just a bunch of crusty old white guys."
Yeah.
Like, it's like, "Oh no, what am I doing here?"
Literally.
Um, and
Yes.
as you're thinking about, like, emotional intelligence, right? And I do worry that that has become a bit of a buzzword and that people are like, "I'm emotionally intelligent," because they know it's the right thing to say, rather
Mhm.
than actually being in touch with that intelligence and
Yep.
understanding it. How do you help people actually know what it means to be emotionally intelligent and put it into practice? And maybe a loaded question, make it mean something for your business that drives revenue.
Yeah, for sure. So tons of data and statistics are out there. Anybody can Google it. But, teams who are working for leaders who are high EQ, high emotional intelligence, and high in empathy have far less turnover, right? A leader who leads in an empathetic manner keeps an employee 3 times longer. It's just the facts. You can look it up anywhere. And so it drives revenue. And you're exactly right, a line item for leadership or training and development around what people even calling them soft skills is dismissive, right?
Yeah.
Power skills of emotional intelligence, they're really what actually move the needle. And that's the first line item to go the minute there's a tough month or a tough quarter. Or, hey, just go on to LinkedIn Learning and get all your learning on. Absolutely not. And it's frustrating because now that we're moving more into, this modern era of work and leadership, the next gen ain't having it. I'm telling you, they're raised by women like me, and they will walk out the door in 2 days versus wait 2 years for your performative allyship to actually not come to fruition.
I wanna touch on something you just said about how, like, when the hard times come, the budget cuts of the soft skills get
Yeah.
cut. It's
Yep.
almost I would maybe even argue it's almost worse than that, that I hear a lot of people tell me that EQ is a personality trait, not
Oh my
something to be
gosh.
learned, right? She's
Yeah.
just naturally emotionally intelligent, very in touch with the underbelly, the undercurrent of thought, and not a learned skill. So talk to us about that. How do you actually learn to be emotionally intelligent in business?
All right. Well, here's something that might blow a lot of minds, I hope. I am 44. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 43. And the conversation I had with my physician was this: do you believe that my insane amount of situational awareness, personal, emotional intelligence is because I have worked on it and worked on it and worked on it because of all the masking I've had to do throughout my life to just fit in? And there was no hesitation in her voice. Yeah, 100%. So, one, it can be learned either, one way or another, right? I learned it because I knew something was off with me. I was a little more blunt than most people. I could finish thoughts in my head, even if I really had never met the person before. I had an idea of what they were going to say. I recognized patterns, all sorts of things that are really specific to those who are ADHD, neurodiverse in some capacity. And so, one, yeah, it's learned. And two, it's interesting to me that in all of the executive spaces that I consult in, and honestly led in up to my career, it was the executive leaders who were literally some of the most emotionally unintelligent and the most reactive people that I met. That's why I came up with the term shamagers, because they were shitty leaders. They shamed people and they were shams of leaders. And so I came up with the term shamagers, and it's they who hold the budgetary power and who would propagate the notion, right? Of, hey, no, you either have it or you don't. Actually, that's not the case. Some of us learn it out of desperation. And then I would ask your audience to consider, when you run across somebody who's thoughtful, intuitive, deeply aware of surroundings, your first thought should be, what the hell happened in their lives to
Yeah.
make them that way?
Yeah, what trauma did they experience growing
Correct.
up that turned them into this
Absolutely.
person? And you can probably go
Absolutely.
one of 2 ways, right? You can either turn into someone who is empathetic because you've been there, done that, or you can become jaded.
Exactly. That's right. That's really what the option was, right? What do I want to do with this weirdness that I have that I couldn't ever name until 43 years old? What do I want to do with it? And I thought, I just need to get better. I just need to figure it out. I need to pick up on clues sooner. I need to watch different parts of bodies for body language, not just facial expression, all of it. And I became obsessed with it because I was not doing well in corporate environments in the very beginning of my career.
Yeah, I've been in startups my whole life, and so I don't know that I would have navigated, corporate and like, large corporate very well because the few times that I've tried it, I've entered into, like, political death traps that I didn't realize until after the fact. I was like, "Oh, no, I stepped in it." On that, like,
Oh,
I didn't
oh,
realize. I
so
had I had I had
relatable.
stepped into someone's turf, and I was like, "Oh, oh, I did not this thing I don't really care about, but you really do. My bad. Sorry."
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that's what it is. And these little walking, sleeping landmines are everywhere. And you literally are like, oh my gosh, all of your egos are so tied up into everything. And so I always try to coach people. Don't be attached to don't be attached to outcome, right? The way, don't be attached to the process. Be attached to the outcome, which means you have to leave your ego outside of the door. And as you know, especially coming from bro culture, I was in wealth management my whole life. Listen, that's all about the bros. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, they weren't really good at leaving their ego out the door.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's flip it though to external, right? So we've been talking a
Yeah.
lot about like the managers and the corporate people and people that we have to work with, right? There's a
Yep.
little bit more flexibility for me to be like, "Hey, you watch the ego."
Mhm.
But like I got to be honest, that would scare me to have any kind like I'm here to serve a customer. I want their money. So like how do you navigate emotional intelligence and building relationships with customers when you're really trying to close a deal or sell something?
Yeah. I just think it comes back to boundaries and your expectation of the way that you expect to be treated and the way that you promise to treat others. Everyone always says, oh, the golden rule, treat someone how you want to be treated. I think that rule's crap. The rule really should be the platinum rule. Treat them how they want to be treated. And if you're going that direction and it's still just not in alignment, there is $0. And I do mean zero. House up for foreclosure. If I used all my retirement, I don't care. Sell my left arm before I work with somebody who doesn't get it and doesn't have the mutual respect that's required.
And isn't self-aware enough to realize that they need to maybe make some changes? Because I don't know about you,
Right.
but I've encountered people where I'm like, Have you ever looked in a mirror in your entire life? Ever? And I'm not talking about physical appearance, I'm talking about, like, your soul's mirror. Have you ever thought to yourself like, "Hey, I'm kinda ugly on the inside?"
And we all know that the answer is no, because basically people have to be able to, people like me who are pretty self aware, we're a mirror to those, well, to everyone really. And if people don't like what they see, oh my gosh, things get really hostile really quickly. And that doesn't change when it's a customer either, right? Like, as an executive coach, as somebody who coaches really high level strategic initiatives from sales functions all the way to leadership functions, I can honestly report that by and large, those who I coach want the coaching. It doesn't mean they don't have times of struggle, right? But they definitely struggle when we butt up against beliefs that they've held about themselves for a long time or ways in which they view themselves. And, I guess that's just my cross to bear, to be the one to kind of help everybody flesh it out.
So, what are you working on right now? What's the big challenge in front of you?
Right now, what I'm working on is helping people realize that if you want to have an executive brand, a talent brand, you have to have a voice that pops outside of what everyone's seeing with AI. You have to have a voice that is super authentic. And that's what I'm working on with all of my clients right now. It's been amazing to see whether I'm coaching somebody from leadership or I'm redoing an entire sales script and helping them optimize it by 60% less time it takes to book a client. All of it comes back to how are we communicating and to who are you communicating and how do they prefer to receive the messaging? Because a lot of us don't really think about that part. And that should be the first thought.
I saw a LinkedIn post a couple of God, it was probably a couple of months ago now, but it's still sticking with me. It was something like, "You built it," being the system, the process, whatever, "to work for you instead of building the system, process, or whatever to work for your customer. And no
Yeah.
wonder they're not enjoying their experience because it was built for you, not built for them."
Absolutely. And how many horror stories? I mean, I worked at a $35 billion bank and we were rolling out some new big program about a savings account. And we got there, all of us traveled to Charlotte from Little Rock, and it was a big, huge ordeal. And we did a 30 bank tour to find out it had never been piloted. Nobody piloted the tech. Nobody piloted the customer experience. These customers are so excited. They're logging in. They want to get their ticket, for their $1,000 win or whatever. A mess, a cluster, a debacle. And I literally looked at my COO. I was brand new. And I said, I truly don't know what to do. So I'm just going to tell you, I don't know what to do when something like this doesn't work. And she said, there's nothing to do. This is why you always have a pilot. And this is why you make sure your customers are satisfied with the experience before you launch it. We got to go right back over and start this thing all over again.
And you have to start it over with your customer base and your employees and everyone who experienced it with total skepticism, right? You really don't get
Oh,
to actually start over. You're not going back to square one. You're going back to square negative 42. Like, you have to not only make up for what you did wrong, but then build a great experience on top of that.
yeah. And you also now have to, on top of that, re win the trust and the
Mm.
time of the people because they've already given their trust that it would work and it didn't. And they already gave you their time, which is precious and nobody has enough of, and you wasted it.
Right. How frustrating too, not only for your customers, but for the employees that had to go through that. Cause I'm sure like they were the ones fielding the calls and the questions and the concerns about this ticket thing that they, were trying to deal with. And if it wasn't piloted, then they don't even know how to answer those questions. And are they empowered to do anything about it? Right. Or does it have to get run up the chain?
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a disaster, all the way around. It was not how I would recommend anyone to, consider a customer journey. And the other thing too is I always tell people when you're writing for a customer or you're definitely thinking of the experience, you've got to think about what emotion do they want to feel at the end of it, right? How do we provide that experience so that the emotions they feel at the end of their interaction supersede those they felt when they came into the interaction. And so that is always what I'm striving for, whether it's a little 20-minute Zoom meeting or not. How can I blow this person's mind? How can I give them a little more than what they anticipated? And sometimes that means don't be getting crazy on the marketing on the front end and promising everything that you can't deliver fully.
When you're thinking about, you talked about you work with clients, you work with people at the highest levels. I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you a two-part question. Part one, what is the first kind of thing you have to do in order to set up a successful coaching engagement? And number two, are there any red flags that when you see this, you're like, this is not going to work?
Yes. Oh, what a great question. The first thing to set up a successful coaching agreement is I spend an entire first session when someone decides that they want to work with me, asking them questions. I have 100 questions that we go through in an hour, and they're tired. I warn them. I'm like, listen, grab a cocktail, glass of wine, 6 cups of water. I don't know what you need, but we're going to dig in, and I want to ask you these questions. Because really, that allows you to understand the psyche of a person and what's really holding them back versus maybe what they think it is. And a lot of times that comes about in random questions. And, that's a profiling mechanism that we're doing there. And then the other thing is, I would say to the second part of the question is really just kind of understanding the energy of a situation. I used to really try to force round pegs in square holes. A lot of times I was the round peg trying to force myself into a square hole. And so I'm really, really sensitive to it, probably maybe too sensitive in some situations. And so if I'm having a coaching conversation with somebody or we're potentially going to work together or for anything that we do, right? They want to hire me for a keynote or to do a workshop. It really doesn't matter. If I'm getting the energy that I'm going to constantly be having to prove my worth to somebody, you know what? This was fun and we're done because I've done all that, right? I'm 44 damn years old and I'm not in the business of proving anything to anybody. We either align and jive and the aura's there or it isn't.
Right. And there's plenty of, for a cliche, plenty of fish in the ocean, right? Plenty of
Yes.
opportunities out there. And it's not worth your health or your soul in some cases to put
Yes.
yourself through that, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you think is in this age of AI?
Mhm.
What do you think is the one thing that leaders are not paying attention to that they should be?
Mm. I don't think they're paying attention to how they actually treat people. I don't think they're paying attention to the fact that the next generation will drive an Uber. Their daddy's thoughts about that be damned before they're going to work with someone who only knows how to speak like a robot and prompt engineer like a robot and does not understand that the human connection is really the only thing that is going to endure.
Yeah, I agree. Um, you've had a lot of opportunities to meet really incredible people. You've listened to a lot of really incredible thought leaders. Tell us who is leading the charge, who is changing and helping us rethink the way we build relationships.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited to mention this person. Her name is Andrea Mohammed. You can find her on LinkedIn. Listen, she is the co-founder of a STEM training company specifically for women called Quantum Bloom. And she is the kind of leader who makes every single table she sits at smarter and stronger and more aligned. And I can say that with confidence because I host a table for community builders and change makers once a month. It's an invitation only dinner here in Charlotte called the Pinnacle Dinner. And when I'm traveling out and about, I do Pinnacle dinners in other cities. And Andrea was most recently our guest of honor at the Pinnacle Dinner in Charlotte. And her approach to building trust through one, being very blunt, very much like that's why we got along so well. But building trust through community is actually principled in how she shows up every day. So she's super strategic from an ego perspective. She's a visionary without a bunch of BS. And honestly, she leads in the way and she's a truth teller like myself that people want to lean into her, right? She's making a huge impact in the training and in the retention of women in STEM.
Christy, if someone's really connecting with you, they want to learn more, they want to have a no BS conversation, they want to talk about late stage diagnosis of ADHD, where can they find you online?
Listen, find me on LinkedIn. It's Kristi Straw MBA. You can get to all my other stuff from that. But I will say if you're tired of playing small, if you're tired of blending in, and if you really want to be able to lead and sell and show up like someone who knows what the hell they bring to the table, start with the free Authentic Authority Archetype quiz. You can find it on my LinkedIn. You can find it on my website, which is impactlegacylab.com. But really, LinkedIn is really where you want to spend your time because honestly, not only will it make you feel better about the way you're presenting yourself to the world because it's more aligned with who you are, but also 51% of people who are visible authentically exceed their sales quota, right? So it's curious to me that so many executives and sales leaders and even experts still don't know how to show up online without sounding like a brochure. And I fixed that.
I love that. And I do want to like double down on that point that you just made. They did a study that if you, as a leader of your company, have more followers than your company's page on LinkedIn, you are like, what, 10x more likely to be successful as an organization as a whole, simply because
Hmm.
your leader is out there producing thought leadership, connecting with the community in ways that your brand pages never could.
It's true. And individual pages get 8 times more interaction than a company page for exactly what you just said. That's how you build trust and employee led brand business development, which is what I call it in my business, right? We call it brand led business development, is where employees put their content out there and they write in a way that repels people who were never going to buy from them or be interested in them anyway, and calls in the people who align with how they approach the world.
Right. Attract the people who are actually going to be your buyers, not spend time talking to
Amen.
people who are never going to buy anyway.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chrissy, for joining me on the growth signal. This was a really fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much, Alyssa.